2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 9, he's continuing on this discussion of the fact that while waiting for the Lord's return, they are to work, walk orderly, and withdraw from those who do not. And we saw the aspect of that withdrawal in verse 6. He'll return to it later on, but he then does at least go from that general walking disorderly to one specific aspect, and that is those who do not work. And he tells them that while he was there at least, he was an example to them. They did not behave disorderly, but also they worked from physical labor. So in verse 9 he says, not because we had not power to make ourselves an example unto you to follow us. The word power, let's go ahead and deal with that, is the word exousia, Greek word exousia. Sometimes you hear this word in various aspects of authority, but that's what it really means, authority. Power from the Greek word dunamis, which indicates something of great power, is different than this word exousia, which deals with authority. He had authority. And let's just go ahead and get a couple of other words, examples. It's a Greek word that we get type from, tupos, type. He was a type of that they could follow, and thus an example. Then the word make, to make ourselves an example, is a Greek word that is oftentimes translated gift. It's didomi in the Greek, a gift, or to bestow a gift, that type of an idea. Not because we had authority, but to bestow a gift of ourselves as an example or as a type unto you. And then the word follow is the Greek word that we get our word mimic from. To mimic, to imitate, or thus to follow. Paul is saying that he had the right, the authority, to be financially supported by the brethren there. When you get into church finances, there's a whole study that has arisen to a great extent because of some arguments against certain things, and we'll mention those in a minute. But as far as preachers, they had the right to be paid, and those preachers to take money from that congregation in support of them. Jesus taught the same principle in Luke 10 and verse 7. And he says, and in the same house remain, eating and drinking, this is to his apostles, in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. So as they were being sent out in a limited commission, they would go to a house and stay there, and they would eat and drink such things as were given unto them, because the laborer is worthy of his hire. And Jesus used that principle in relationship to his apostles being financially supported by the person that they were staying with. The idea of don't go from house to house is the idea, well, hey, I can get a little bit better food or a little bit more over here, so I'll go over there. And then look around, after a while, oh, I can get something better over here, and so I'm going to go. No, you don't do that. You're not out for that type of reason. But you are worthy to be supported by people that you're working for. Paul was by trade a tent maker. And so he made tents. He did that while he was at Thessalonica as a pattern or a type for them. Not for them to become tent makers, but for the work that he was involved in. But he had the right or the power to take support from the Thessalonian congregation. It was not mandatory on his part to take it, though. It is one of those optional things. Now then, let's distinguish between those two ideas, both of them being authorized by God. A mandatory thing is something that must be done, and if you do not do it, you sin in failing to do it. Was Paul required and he sinned if he failed to take financial support from that congregation? No. He had the right to, he had the power to, but it wasn't mandatory. It was not required. It was, though, authorized in an optional way. That is, exactly the way in which he used it on this occasion in I'll work on the side and preach, but I won't take money from the congregation. He did that elsewhere. Not only at Thessalonica, he did it at Corinth and at Ephesus. We know that. Those two places. So, understand that difference between obligation or something that's mandatory and something that's optional. We learn that in this.
The Catholic Church really messed that up. They sold districts or give it to their children so they could make money. That's all it was for. It wasn't to serve supposedly the church, just to make money.
The Catholic Church, its major thrust was two things: power and money. Those were the two major things historically of the Catholic Church. Religious didn't make a amount to a hill of beans with the Catholic Church. Still doesn't in reality. It was just an avenue through which they obtained power.
So indulgence is one other thing.
Well, you could talk. We could spend the rest of the time talking about the things which they did that were wrong. But they wanted power. They wanted world control, put it that way. They in reality wanted a world government. Now I can't even think of the word. One government over the entire world, and it was to be the Roman Catholic Church being that government. And the other aspect was, of course, money. And the money is where the indulgences came in, along with purgatory. Those were great money-making projects for them. They didn't care anything whether it's scriptural or not. It was just money. But preacher does have the right to be supported by the congregation he works with. And Paul, using the option that he had, decided, I'm not going to be paid by the church there. I'm going to work in my job of tent making. Possibly, we don't know this as a fact, but I think there's some good possibilities that we can at least explore. Paul knew that the Thessalonians tended to idleness. Why? Because in the first Thessalonian letter he mentions it, and now then an entire section dealing with their idleness. Seems to indicate that they might have tended toward that within their lives or their society. We are raising a society, or have raised a society, where not working is extolled. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But a lot of you older generation people, that I'm not, of course, you started working at a very young age, and you had chores to do, and you spent most of the day working when you weren't at school. And during the summer months, the summer months were designed to allow the kids time to work in the fields and to get a harvest in the field. That's why you have the summer vacation. Of course, now then, parents, we don't want to have, we don't want our kids to have to do all that. And they've learned not to work. Can't even get them in the yard. They're not used to it. And so I can remember the first time that I was really faced with that. As far as I was walking down a street, and this was in Fort Lauderdale. It was late at night, and you have person after person just standing there, spare change. That's where I was at the time. And we were walking down that street and just, I don't remember and don't care. I think I was in college at the time, and might have been, probably in college at the time. So, not too many years ago. But it might have been you asking me for the spare change. I don't know. Well, most of them were, so. The idea of working was totally foreign to them. Now then we have people, stand out on the street corner asking for money. What about it? I didn't do it. I guess I still feel like I almost should have. So many times, here they are standing for a job, and there's place that's trying to get someone to work for them. And I wanted to just say, well, here's the what I'll give you. Go to these places and get you a job. And they even had, some of them, the audacity to have a sign that said, we'll work for money. Well, there's work right all around you. All you had to do is go do it. Of course, some people who had that sign, they taught others real quick. They're not willing to work. They don't want to work. One person, and I remember who told me the story, he tried to hire some of them. And they were at least honest with him and said, no, I can make more money doing this than I can working for you. So what we've done is we've perpetrated a generation that does not know how to work anymore. And thankfully, that's not everyone, but we have a big society that, and kids in particular, as they grow up, are like into that.
So one sign out there, told you that it said, I'm not going to lie, I just want beer.
Yeah.
You know he would get more money than anybody else.
He wasn't going to lie about it, at least. He just wanted some beer. Maybe Paul knew, because of the emphasis that we see in both books, that the Thessalonians tended to that type of a lifestyle. We don't know for certain, but it would tie in that type of an attitude with what he does right.
What they also, they're expecting the imminent return of Christ, so they wasn't working.
Well, that becomes another part of it, and we were going to talk about that later too. But yes, they were expecting the immediate return, and so some of them had sold their goods and were just saying they're waiting for them, and became busybodies. But Paul became a good example for them, a type for them, and doing his own business, keeping his business of tent making going and working with his hands, so that they would mimic him. That's basically the idea. I became a type for you to mimic. And I gave that as a gift to you. Because I had the right to be supported. I had the right not to take support from the church. The church does have the right to expend money on those things that are authorized by God. What we're seeing today is that the church is using their money in a way that God has not authorized the church to do. And you have to keep a distinction between the church and the family. Families have a right to do things which the church does not. The church has its work. It's a divine institution authorized by God. The home is a divinely authorized organization by God. Does the church have the right to do everything that the home has the right to do? Well, of course not. Can the home do things that the church cannot do? Absolutely. But what we see a great extent today is that members of the church want the church to engage in activities that reside with the home. Some cases, some things, those responsibilities overlap. The church has the obligation to teach the gospel. Would that be to the kids, members? Well, yes, it would include that. But who has the responsibility of that teaching? The parents, and the father and specifically. He has that authority to make sure that his children are brought up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, Ephesians 6:4. In that teaching and training within the home, there's going to be the providing of recreation, wholesome recreation. Maybe we should change it to that. Does the church have the right to start in paying for that recreation then? Well, of course not. That's the home's responsibility, not the church's. Or get-togethers, or a lot of those activities that the home would engage in. Going on a trip to whether it be a sporting place or these fun places, the home has the right to do that. Does the church have the right to, well, we're going to have all of the kids get together? And no, it doesn't have that right to do that. That's not the responsibility of the church.
Like clients and children of church going to the bowling episode. Ain't right? Something like that. That's one example. Go out and on a bowling episode. You can't finance that with the church treasurer.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Boeings?
Like if the children, get kids at church want to go bowling.
Oh, bowling.
Wouldn't finance the bowling.
No, that would be an illustration. Goes back to, those that were close to Six Flags, going to Six Flags, and the church providing the transportation and getting them together to do that. Why did congregations all over the brotherhood start building gymnasiums? To provide entertainment and recreation and exercise, which is the home's responsibility, not the church's. Can the church help out in support of a home? Well, certainly. If a family here is having financial difficulties, maybe something happened, can the church help them in support? Well, certainly. Let me just mention in 1 Timothy, the 5th chapter, since kind of a preview of what Tim will be teaching on the far distant future. It talks about taking a widow into the number. And has arisen a discussion, can the church even support financially a widow under the age of 60? Yes. Can they take her into the number? No. What's the difference? Taking her into the number would basically be putting her into the budget to give monthly support to her to finance her life. Can't do that. till at least she's over 60 and meets those qualifications that he mentions there. Under that age, if there's a need for help, one-time type of situation, absolutely, the church can do that. Now then, I'm going to get into trouble. What about orphans' homes? Can the church support an orphan's home? What is an orphan's home? What's an organization, isn't it, to take in orphans? Well, not really. It's a home. Now then, in my home, we had to meet certain legal requirements for it to be a home. We had to have blood tests done. We had to have a license. We had to get married. And in that marriage ceremony afterwards, that document had to be signed by the one who was doing the ceremony and married us, and it had to be then turned into the state. There were requirements that we had to meet as far as our home is concerned. An orphan's home is simply a home that has met the requirement. It has to meet the requirements that the government has regulated for it. But all it is a home. And just as the church can, yes, financially give help to a home, so it can an orphan's home. There's no difference between them. Some tried to make it so, and it ended up dividing the church. Because some opposed giving of money to an orphan's home. Why? Because it was an organization. Can the church, in its worship and the providing a place to worship, which the church is authorized to do, give money to organizations? This means yes, this means no. I don't know. Can we, in providing a place to worship, give money to organizations, even governmental organizations? I ask you, do we pay an electric bill for the lights in this building? Oh, we do? Don't? Boy, that's surprising to me if we don't. Of course we do. We pay a bunch of money to Florida Power and Light, an organization that is not the church, that is not a home, that basically, it's a good question exactly what it is. It's protected by the government, but we pay for the water. Escambia County, ECUA. Well, church is for now tax exempt as far as property taxes. I say right now. It can always change, and some want to get it changed. Can the church? That's what I just said. We are a tax exempt organization because we are a religious group. The government at this time and in this nation exempts religious organizations from taxes and for property taxes. so far. And as I say, some are trying to get this changed, but so far, we still don't have, when you give money, we don't have to account for that and say, okay, here's the taxes, and send that, all of the taxes to the government for the contributions that we receive. The property that we own, that is tax exempt. We don't have to pay property taxes. So we are exempt from taxes in that sense. We don't have to pay taxes on a lot of the things that we purchase for the church. But the church has the right to buy those things, and the work in which we do of worship and evangelizing and teaching us the gospel to edify us, we have the right to spend money, the church's money, in those areas. And as I know that in getting into a discussion of the finances of the church, you run into a great deal of problems. And congregations have been split in years past, in particular, over the issues that have divided the church, and really should not be to a great extent. But we get back to, what does the church have the right to spend money on? Well, one of them is the paying of a preacher. And Paul had the right, power, or the authority to take that money. Because a laborer is worthy of his hire. In verse 10, though, he adds, "For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat." So while Paul was there at Thessalonica, he commanded. This is a command. It is an order. Just as in the military, you're not given options, you're given orders. And if you say, well, the captain or the sergeant or whoever it is that gave the order, it really wasn't an order, I'll just do it if I want to, and if we don't want to do it, we won't. Doesn't work that way, does it? It is an order. You have to do it. A command. You have to do it. You might get by with it one time and maybe not end up in the brig. But he commanded, if a person did not work, he was not supposed to eat. The word commanded isn't, if you have that Greek sheet that I gave you on verbs, it's in the imperfect tense. In other words, this is something that he repeatedly stated, commanded. He told them repeatedly, over, and over. Person doesn't work, neither shall he eat. That's why I said it's possible that the Thessalonians tended to that way. Why would the need be to repeatedly order them, if a person doesn't work, neither shall he eat? If there's not that tendency on some, at least some of their parts, not to work. But we also notice the present tenses that are in here. Would is in the present. If any would not work, work is in the present tense. And eat is in the present tense. So those three, present tense, continuous action. That's what that is. So we repeatedly ordered you that if someone would not continue to work, he should not continue to eat. That's rather strong, isn't it? Paul is making a firm rule of Christian conduct. A Christian must work. Doesn't have a choice about it. And I know the problems with doing it in our society today, but one of the problems that I have with our benevolent work is that we simply give food to people. I want them to work for it. Give them something to do. I've paid people out of my pocket to, wash a car. Oh man, that's real hard work, but and someone's up here give me some money, give me some, greed is another sin. We've paid people to rake leaves before and gave them money. Church property, you can't do that anymore. Why? No. What if they're out there raking leaves and they twist their ankle and break it?
Oh, yeah. And they're on your property with
You get a big lawsuit then.
Oh, yeah, they can sue you.
You've got to at least consider those things in our society today.
Yeah.
As bad as it is having to think that way, you have to within our society. That's true. Some would fake getting an injury so that they could get money, can sue you. Even though that's the way I would tend, they have to work in order to get anything. They want some food, okay. In fact, one person just wanted some gas money. You know how that goes. And so we sent him out, and he raked leaves for about 4 hours in our yard. It was a big yard. And afterwards, we offered to feed him as well. No, I don't want any. I'm fine. Just need some gas money to get to my location. That's all he wanted. So we paid him, and he went on his way. Never saw him again. But he worked for that money. That's honorable, Tim.
During the Depression, this is what they would do. There were a lot of what they called hobos.
Mm-hmm.
When they showed up for a bite to eat, they knew they were going to be required to work, and they would do the job, knowing that after they worked, then they would be fed a home-cooked meal.
Yeah.
That's changed.
That has changed in our society.
Couldn't they expect they to go lay in a homeowner's yard and still a homeowner?
That would be a possibility, yes. That's why we have homeowners insurance as well. But firm rule of Christian conduct is a person has to continue to work. And Let's add, we're not talking about someone who is incapable of working. There's some people that don't have that capability and need help. Understand that. We're not talking about that type of individual. We're talking about the individual who has the ability to work. He needs to work, or she needs to work. Bible Knowledge Commentary wrote concerning this that they were not to be supported by other Christians out of a sense of charity. Does that sound familiar to today? They go on. The loving thing to do for those drones was to let them go hungry so that they would be forced to do right and go to work. No Christian who is able but unwilling to work should be maintained by others who labor on his behalf. And that's the way it is. It should be. They want to work or not work, and you work and provide everything for them. Kind of way hitchhikers are today. You provide the car, you provide the transportation, the gas, you provide all of these things, and I'll go along for the ride. But don't expect me to pay the gas. Don't expect me to pay.
Your car in your life too.
This saying almost has been frequently used as a proverb among Jews and others. If man doesn't work, neither let him eat. We have had that. At one time we kind of believed that, but we don't anymore. Brother Tom Waycaster added, "It is pathetic that our government has rewarded the freeloader and encouraged laziness. Consequently, those of idle mind and body have come to expect monetary gain for their indolent and slothful behavior. When will men and governments learn the wisdom that contained in this beautiful verse?" And our government has, to a great extent, out of its feeling of charity, encouraged laziness and non-work. And that has aided in that societal thought and thinking that we've got to provide charity for these individuals who don't work. And it is a shame that we've gotten to this point, both from the government standpoint, but also the church and as individuals. If a person doesn't work, neither should he eat. We'll start with verse 11, Lord willing, next time.